Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, we get to announce our brand new partnerships for the 2026 season of Tackle Talk. We have some awesome news coming out of the state of Arkansas as they try to beef up their trophy fishing potential. We ask you, the listeners, about your experience with fuzzy baits so far, and we crack open the mailbag. All that and more in this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk podcast. I hope you all had a great, happy new year. And now, as we settle back into our everyday lives after family events and maybe some time off work if you were lucky, some traveling maybe, today we have a lot to cover as we start the new year here at Tackle Talk. So first off, a very quick PSA. We'll have more to come on this in the next few weeks, but just to let everybody know, the Columbus Fishing Expo is quickly approaching Friday, June 30th. From noon to 7 p.m., Saturday, June 31st from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Sunday, February 1st from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. I will, of course, be there again this year. We'll have the Tackle Talk booth, and the plan is just to hang out and meet as many of you as possible and talk some fishing. That is like my number one objective these 3 days is to hang out at the booth. But I'm also planning on having a little bit of like a bass fishing yard sale at the booth this year with some of my old rods and reels and a ton of baits and maybe some new and used batteries and like all kinds of stuff at a great price if you're wanting to pick up something on a little bit more of a bargain. So we'll have a little bit of something for everybody. And as always, we'll still be doing our seminars that weekend as well. I don't know the seminar schedule yet, but as soon as that's finalized, I'll make sure to let you all know so you can kind of plan out when and where to be at certain times and the topics those seminars will be and all that good stuff too. But I just wanted to put that out there. I know we've still got a few months to go, but I'd love to see you guys at the expo January 30th through February 1st in Columbus, Ohio. Again, the booth will be there all 3 days, seminars, gear for sale, the whole 9 yards, so come hang out. And if you need more info on it, I'll leave the link to the expo website below in today's show notes, just in case you want to buy tickets ahead of time, which I strongly encourage so that you don't have to wait in the box office line. If you know, you know. If you've been to this expo before, it is so nice just to have your tickets ahead of time and walk right in. So you can click the link below, January 30th through February 1st in Columbus, Ohio. Looking forward to seeing you all there. All right, next up here today, since it is our first episode of the year, I have some really exciting announcements about Tackle Talk as a whole to make to you all now that we're past January 1st. And I feel like I've been pretty open and honest the past few years that it takes great partners to make this show happen every single week. And, to kind of allow us to do the things that we do here at Tackle Talk, I have a lot of expenses that this show racks up. Hosting site fees, website fees, software subscriptions, physical recording gear and hardware, travel to iCast and the Bassmaster Classic, and off-site episodes. The list goes on and on. Like, it takes quite a bit of money to actually run Tackle Talk. Well, the reason that this show is able to remain free to you all each and every week is because we've always had great sponsors and great partners here at Tackle Talk. And that keeps us from having to do any sort of memberships or subscriptions or Patreon or any of that kind of stuff, right? I really like the idea of Tackle Talk being free to any man, woman, child that wants to listen and not passing the cost of production on to you, the listener, or just trying to make a quick buck off of the listeners directly. That just doesn't sit right with me. So we've always avoided that with great partnerships. And this year in 2026, I'm so excited to announce our brand new partnership lineup for the upcoming year. So the first new partner of the Tackle Talk podcast in 2026 is Amped Outdoors. Amped Outdoors is coming on as the official lithium battery sponsor of the Tackle Talk podcast and the presenting sponsor of the Tackle Talk mailbag. Now, you guys know we used to work with a different company, and all I'll say is over the last few years, I've really learned what is actually important to me in a battery company. And that took some time, but there are really like 3 or 4 things that I wanted for you, the listeners, when it comes to a battery partner here on Tackle Talk. I wanted better technology and better features. I wanted a more affordable product, and I wanted great people behind the product. And you get all of those things with Amped Outdoors. So for instance, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, The battery that I used to use in my kayak to power my motor, you guys know what that battery was $1,125. That's how much that battery costs now. That old battery did not have Bluetooth monitoring. It was not heated, so you weren't supposed to charge it below 32 degrees. With Amped, you get a 24-volt, 50 amp hour lithium battery with Bluetooth connectivity via their app, so you can monitor your remaining power. And it's heated, so the charger actually raises the temperature of that battery up to like 32 degrees when it's charging, and it heats it so that you can charge it below freezing safely. All of that you're going to get for $749, so $376 less than the battery that I used before, with way better tech and way better features. And to top it all off, just like the cherry on top of this whole thing, they're individually owned by a great guy out of Wisconsin right here in the Midwest. Not some mega corporation with private equity control, none of that stuff. So this is a win-win for everybody. And we're very, very excited to welcome on Amped Outdoors as the official lithium battery of the Tackle Talk podcast. Okay, next up here, we have another exciting one. We have an official electronics partner heading into the 2026 season as we welcome Humminbird as a partner of the Tackle Talk podcast. Now, you guys will remember a few months ago, if you listen to Tackle Talk every week, there was a show, and again, this is probably maybe August or early fall timeframe, that I had said that I had gone back and forth between Garmin and Humminbird over the last 5 or 10 years, just personally, like what I buy and what I put on my kayak and what I take out with me. And I was getting frustrated with my current equipment, and I was about to switch back to Humminbird. Well, the universe just kind of has a way of aligning sometimes, and not only will I be switching back to Humminbird personally for all my electronics in 2026, but they're coming on as a sponsor of Tackle Talk. So Humminbird makes, and I've said this again multiple times on the show, the best side imaging that I've ever used, which is my number one electronics tool out there on the water. Mega SI is fantastic. Also, Mega Live 2 is so much better than previous Mega Live, and it's a great forward-facing setup that requires no black box, which is important to me as a kayak angler. I've learned that over the past couple years too, that I hate lugging that black box around. And then last year, they came out with their newest line of head units, the Explore series, and those are phenomenal. The user interface is clean and it's easy to maneuver. It's not clunky and requiring like multiple window panes or different menu series to get to the settings that you want, like some past units made you do. It's a heck of a unit. It comes in 9 inches, 10 inches, and 12-inch sizes, and it's been so well received that it won both Best of Category and the Angler's Choice Award at ICAST last year. And then some other things that just kind of blow your mind. Like, it comes with Lake Master and Coastmaster maps included. That's like over 13,000 lakes and waterways with 1-foot contour lines preloaded on it, meaning you don't have to pay extra for them. Because in the past, you had to pay, I think it was like $200-ish for each Lake Master chip. And that was just for like one little region, right? Like, so you would get, I don't know, Minnesota, or you would get the Great Lakes or something like that. Now, with those Explore units, you get Lake Master and Coastmaster maps included with that unit. So again, trying to stay true to that theme of Tackle Talk of quality and value going hand in hand, Humminbird does just that. So we are very excited to welcome on Humminbird as a partner of Tackle Talk in 2026. And then that takes us to another company here in the same family that will also be joining Tackle Talk as a sponsor this year, and that's Minn Kota. And then together, Minn Kota and Humminbird will alternate as the weekly sponsor of the fishing pole. And I mean, talk about a brand and a product line that is just synonymous with bass fishing. It's Minn Kota, like makers of probably the most reliable trolling motors on the planet. They've got great shallow water anchors, accessories. They've got the new kayak trolling motors, the Terova. I mean, Spot Lock. Have you ever heard of it? You know you're doing something right when your product or your technology becomes the common phrase for a product type. It's kind of like when everybody calls something a Kleenex, even though Kleenex is just one particular brand of facial tissue, and you probably should say tissue anytime you refer to them, but everybody just calls them Kleenexes. Same thing with Band-Aid, right? Not every bandage is a Band-Aid, but we call them Band-Aids because Band-Aid is the king of the category. It's the same thing with Spot Lock. Spot Lock is Minn Kota. If you have a Garmin, it's technically called Anchor Lock. And then if you have a Lowrance Ghost or something like that, I think they call that Anchor Mode. But Minn Kota is Spot Lock, the king of GPS anchoring. So for all you boat guys and gals out there, or you lake and pond kayak anglers, Minn Kota has you covered, and they have all of us covered as a great partner of Tackle Talk in 2026. And then that takes us to our final new partner heading into the new year, and it should come as no surprise to anybody after our episode 2 weeks ago that there just isn't a world where Brian Dolney is opening up a tackle shop and we're not going to support him and continue to work with the best staff and the best team in the fishing business. So of course, the Rod Locker will be a very, very important part of the Tackle Talk family, and we'll be stepping in as the new title sponsor of Tackle Talk. So you heard Brian lay all of the cards on the table like 2 weeks ago here on the show, and I do not know how you can listen to that episode and not want the Rod Locker and those guys to succeed. You've got a gentleman that has 17 years experience in the bass fishing industry, now getting to run his own ship the way that he's always wanted to run it. And I got to tell you, I am kind of like a kid on Christmas morning level excited about what's going to come with the Rod Locker. So I've seen some sneak peeks of photos of the new shop. And I got to say, if you live anywhere near Evansville, Indiana area, I'm incredibly jealous of you because you are very lucky to have a shop like that within driving distance of you. But then for those of us that are just all across the country, the website is currently being built. The stock is flowing in by the day. And I know that those guys are just chomping at the bit to officially open and start serving everybody again. So I have orders that I'm eagerly waiting to make. And I know from the emails and the messages that we've got over the past couple weeks, I'm sure there are a lot of you that are in the same boat. So that is our new partnership lineup heading into the 2026 season here at Tackle Talk: Amped Outdoors, Humminbird, Minn Kota, and the Rod Locker. 4 incredible companies and brands that are allowing us to keep our independence and our unbiased approach to Tackle Talk that we've had over the past 6+ years at this point. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick official update now that January 1st has passed. You're going to start seeing these brands incorporated into Tackle Talk with some messaging and some thank yous and all of that type of stuff. So I just wanted to publicly announce it. Amped Outdoors, Humminbird, Minn Kota, and the Rod Locker are going to make Tackle Talk possible in 2026. We appreciate them all a ton. And if you want to support the show, if you want to support Tackle Talk, again, we don't do Patreon, we don't do chat donations or monthly memberships. Honest to goodness, the best thing you can do to support the show is just support our partners because they believe in us enough to help us continue Tackle Talk. So there is your update. A lot of that has been in the works for 6+ months at this point, and we're very excited to announce our new partners for this year. All right, next up here, let's get to some fishing news. And the next thing we have here today is some exciting news for those of you that are listening in Arkansas, or maybe some hope for the rest of us out there in other states that maybe will follow suit someday. So I've got an article here from the Pine Bluff Commercial, which is an Arkansas newspaper, that's titled "Arkansas's New Trophy Bass Program Works to Reward Anglers, Help Fish Population." So the article here says, and I won't read all of it, but I'm going to read the important parts. This is probably one of the most exciting things I've been a part of in my career. Arkansas Game and Fish Commission Fisheries Division Chief. Oh my gosh, what a title there. Sorry. Arkansas Game and Fish Commission Fisheries Division Chief Tommy Laird. That is a mouthful. Could have been speaking to at least a dozen members of the commission's staff as he said those words in mid-July at the unveiling of the Legacy Lunker Trophy Bass Program, which starts January 1st. Arkansas's Legacy Lunker combines citizen science with advanced hatchery technology and techniques to reinforce superior genetics in Arkansas's largemouth bass populations. Any angler who catches a largemouth bass weighing 10 pounds or more from Arkansas waters from January 1st through March 31st each year can call the Game and Fish Commission's new Lunker line at 833-948-2277 anytime, day or night. A representative from the agency will meet them at the lake and take possession of the fish if it is healthy enough and return it to the commission's Joe Hogan State Fish Hatchery and spawn it with genetically superior male bass to create improved fingerlings that will be stocked in the lake. The Legacy Lunker will also go back to the lake where she was caught once the spawning process is complete. In return for their participation, anglers receive a free replica mount of their fish crafted by Harper's Pure Country Taxidermy and are entered into a drawing held later in the year for a new boat. The fisheries biologists in Texas have really been great partners in the launch of our Legacy Lunker program, said Jeremy Risley, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission Black Bass Program Coordinator. They've streamlined their process and allowed us to catch up with nearly 4 decades of their learning curve within a year or so. We couldn't do this without that sort of support from a fellow state conservation agency. We've had to deviate from things slightly to fit the facilities and resources that we have available, but we've been working hard to make tweaks to accommodate those differences. And then I'll skip some here. Some of this is about preventing diseases, segregating females based on watersheds, some interesting stuff there, but stuff that doesn't really apply to us too much. And then the next thing here says, an area where Arkansas is hoping to leapfrog Texas's program is with the male component of the Legacy Lunker program. Instead of working for generations to find male fish with big genetics, the Game and Fish Commission is working with a partner from private industry, Red Hills Fishery in Georgia. This company has worked for years to identify the exact genetics that contribute to large fish growth in Florida bass, and they're sharing that knowledge and expertise in the process. We're bringing in their Titan Max line of largemouths to be the males that spawn with our angler-contributed lunkers, Miller said. These are essentially thoroughbred bass that have been identified as proven producers of fast, large-growing bass. Red Hills is also working with us to streamline our hatchery process and troubleshoot any issues that may come up. Red Hills is also testing the Florida bass broodstock we have on hand to determine if they have the same genetic markers for high growth. We want as much of the fish used in the Legacy Lunker program to originate from Arkansas as we can. These aren't just fish that we got from somewhere else and we hope will grow big, he said. These are fish that came from Arkansas water, so we know they have the right genetics to grow big here. The fingerlings they produce will go into that body of water where they came from, and the female will be returned to the water once she's spawned and recovered. This isn't about adding more fish, but about increasing the chances of the fish that are there having those big fish genetics, Miller said. In the wild, that 10-pound bass may only pull off one successful spawn a year if weather conditions, nest robbers, and water level fluctuations don't destroy her nest. In the hatchery, we can get 2 to 3 spawns from that fish in one spring with a huge hatching success. Those newly hatched fry also have a much better chance of survival to the fingerling stage, and those fingerlings have a much better chance at being adults to carry on those genetics and grow trophy size. So there's a little bit more here, but I don't want to take 30 minutes reading it here on the show, but it's cool for a few reasons. One, I think the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is like so top-notch at 95% of what they do, aside from maybe like a few issues here and there with local anglers about weed control gripes or spraying or things like that. But on the stocking and genetic side, they are leading the country, in my opinion. That Share Lunker program is one of the coolest programs in all of fishing. It lets anglers who catch, I think the sizes are like 8 pounds and up is the smallest that they'll take. And then there's another division that starts at 10 pounds. And then there's another division, I think, that starts at 13 pounds. But you can take a true trophy fish caught from January through March in Texas and hand it over to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Share Lunker program. And they take that fish, breed it with other genetically superior fish in a controlled environment, and then they use those to stock the lakes that they manage in Texas, obviously. And that program has probably made Texas the big bass factory that it is, obviously along with climate and all that other type of stuff. But I'm sure it's helping a lot. And then on the angler side of things, if you do submit one of those Share Lunker fish, you get a free replica mount made just like they're going to do in Arkansas. In Texas, I've seen them present those on stage at the Bassmaster Classic, which is pretty cool. And it's just a great program for everybody involved, it seems like. The fish, the state agency, the anglers, everybody always has great things to say about that program. And it's cool to see someone trying to replicate it with Texas's help and input, taking into account all of the differences between Arkansas and Texas, like the different fisheries, and trying to put their own spin on it. In Arkansas's case, by focusing on the male component of the spawning process as well. So on one hand, it's great for the residents and listeners in Arkansas, I guess, that are listening to this episode, obviously. But two, it should also give us some hope for those of us that live in other states that haven't done something like this, that maybe over time our states will kind of get on board and pour resources into something like this as well. Because watching the state use time, money, and resources into trying to improve the trophy bass population in your state should be something that we all want from our respective DNRs. So shout out to Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. If you caught it too, also a little Easter egg in there, Jeremy Risley. If that name rings a bell or sounds familiar to you, that is because he is a past guest of the Tackle Talk podcast. We had him and another researcher on about 2 or 3 years ago to talk about a smallmouth pressure study that they did in their local creeks down there. And now look at them, right? A couple years later, they are implementing the Legacy Lunker program. So very cool news out of Arkansas. All right, the next thing here, let's jump into this week's fishing poll presented by Humminbird.
This is the Tackle Talk podcast fishing poll. Brought to you by Humminbird. Explore more at humminbird.com.
All right, everybody. On this week's fishing poll, we tackle one of the hottest fads in bass fishing over the last probably year or so, and that's fuzzy baits. And the bass fishing world is pretty divided on this, I think, so I figured it would make a pretty fun fishing poll to start out the year. So my question in this week's fishing poll was quite simply, have you caught a bass on a fuzzy bait yet? And a couple things to note here before we get into this. One, I kind of wanted to ask, do you think fuzzy baits are a fad? Or do you think they're a trend that's going to fade out pretty quick? But I stopped myself because I don't think that gets to the root of the question. It's just an opinion. And that opinion is so subjective that it just kind of muddies up the issue a little bit. So I decided instead to go with facts. And I don't care what you think about them as baits. Have you caught a single fish on them yet? Not have you bought them, not have you thrown them, not have you looked at them in the store and thought they were cool or thought they were dumb. Have you caught a fish on one yet? Because that is the great equalizer. That is where we start to get somewhere. Thoughts don't tell the whole story a lot of times. Fish in the boat do start to tell that story. So how many of you have actually went out, bought them, rigged them up, fished them long enough to catch a single fish on them? And I bet the answer surprises us. So before we get into the results and before I look at them for the first time, I will give you my answer, which is no. I have actually not caught a single fish on a fuzzy bait yet. No dice, no nuggets, no fuzzy TRDs, no fuzzy octagons or fuzzy pyramids or tumbleweeds or whatever they are, nothing like that. And I still kind of fall into the camp where I think that they're a fad and I think they will fade out over time. Not a fad in the sense like they'll be forgotten about completely in a year, but I think, and I could be wrong on this could age very poorly, but I would venture to say if we look back in 10 years from now, they are a relative non-player in the tackle space, but we will see. Bookmark this. It's the first couple days of 2026. In 2036, if everybody is still smacking fish on fuzzy baits, then I will eat my words, I guess. But to answer the question truthfully, no, I have not caught a single fish on them. Now, I know they work, but almost everything works. And I'm putting works in air quotes there because that's such a lame argument with baits sometimes. When you say, hey, that's a dumb bait, and they go, hey, they catch fish. Well, yeah, like a lot of things can catch fish or have caught fish. I mean, I could go out right now. I could put a Swedish fish candy on a drop shot and go catch smallmouth with it. It doesn't mean it's a good bait. So the question shouldn't be, does it catch fish? It should be, does it catch more fish than the alternatives out there? Is it more effective in one situation over another, or in certain conditions or seasons or clarity or whatever it is? Is it a better choice than a straight tail minnow or a worm or another small plastic on the exact same drop shot or Nico hook? That I don't know. I know there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there of someone saying, well, yeah, man, I went out last week and I threw a worm and I didn't get bit. And then I switched over to dice and I caught him. But I still think the jury is out a little bit for me on whether or not I really buy into the whole fuzzy bait fad or not. And truthfully, I would probably lean toward the no category. But the fun part about the fishing poll is it's not about me. It's about you guys. Have you caught a single fish on a fuzzy bait so far? And I set the bar pretty low here to try and give fuzzy baits a chance on this one. One fish. That's all I'm asking. Have you caught a fish on fuzzy baits? So let's open the results here for the first time. I have not seen these, of course. And, okay, I thought with saying a fish that we would help the fuzzy baits out here a little bit, but I don't think we did. 65% of you said no, you have not caught a single fish on a fuzzy bait of any sort. So basically 2/3 of the listeners said no. And that's telling to me because that means only 35% of respondents said that they had caught a fish on a fuzzy bait of any sort. And guys, these baits are relatively new, but they're also so widely available now that them being, so new or so tough to get isn't an excuse for these baits anymore. Strike King makes them, Z-Man makes them, X-Zone Lures makes them. They're not just some obscure, expensive Japanese bait these days. And still, a year later, only 1 in 3 of our listeners have caught a fish on a fuzzy bait of any kind. And I would like to think that that helps my cause a little bit, my case a little bit for saying that these really aren't the giant mainstream game-changing wave of baits that these companies tried to push on us this year. I think most people are still reaching for a bait fish profile on that drop shot or a standard worm profile for that Nico rig. This isn't like the Ned rig craze 2.0 that lasted 10 plus years and everybody was making everything downsized to fit a Ned rig, and it's still going, by the way, today. So I don't think that's even over yet, but at least right now in this week's fishing poll, I think Tackle Talk listeners aren't exactly beating the brakes off the fish with fuzzy baits according to our poll, and I think most of us are probably still throwing our trusty staple baits more than these brand new fuzzy baits that every company tried to give us this year. All right, let's move on here. And finally, let's wrap up with some questions from the mailbag powered by Amped Outdoors.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Mailbag, powered by Amped Outdoors, your source for premium, affordable lithium batteries.
All right, everybody. I have a couple questions here that I purposefully saved for the first episode of 2026 because they're a little bit more show-focused and less about a certain technique or a piece of gear or anything like that. And I think usually I would rather talk about catching fish, less about myself, less about the show. But I figured since this is the first show of 2026, this is the kickoff, this is where we're announcing a lot of our new partners this year, and it is a pretty show-heavy episode that they probably made sense today. So our first question here is from Landon, who said, "Hey, Andrew, it seems like a lot of mailbag questions seem to start out like this, but I think I still need to say it. Thanks for everything you do. I'm sure you hear it a lot, but I got into bass fishing 3 years ago, and Tackle Talk has fast-tracked my learning curve, and I can't tell you how many fish I've caught because of tips that I heard on the show. I do have a weird question, though. What is the biggest struggle or weakness with the show? It seems so polished and professional when it's released, but everybody has their struggles. What do you struggle with doing Tackle Talk? Appreciate it. Keep it up, Landon." Hey, Landon, thanks for writing in. That is a tough one. Biggest struggle. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of them, right? It's not just one. It's multiple things all at one time. I would say I struggle with time management for sure. I struggle trying to handle everything myself. Like, I'm a one-man show here, nobody else. It is me, myself, and I running, editing, producing, graphics, everything now is all 100% me. So trying to hold that down with a very, very high hour full-time job and family and everything that I've got going on, just physically getting enough time to do the show and to do it at the level that you guys deserve every single week is one of my struggles for sure. But I found ways to work that out throughout the years, just a lot of late nights and scheduling things to a T. I also struggle with the money side of this because fishing gear is expensive, and trying to buy a lot of this gear to review or use enough of it. Maybe it's not like a true review, but maybe it's just putting enough time in with gear so that I have formulated my opinions and my thoughts from like a true place and not just me reading descriptions online or whatever, but actual time on the water. That's tough because I just don't have an unlimited supply of money. I'm on a budget just like you guys are. It would be way easier if I just took free stuff from every company that offered to send us free stuff, but I really try to keep the integrity of the show. But it feels like some of these folks can do a review like every couple hours because they just have this pile of free gear that they're being sent all the time. And so the volume is there. I struggle sometimes because I don't have the volume that other people do. So there are some days where I wish that we did that and we just took a bunch of gear and we had more gear to play with and try, but I just keep telling myself that it's the right thing to do, and at the end of the day, it'll be worth it in the long run. But I would say my biggest struggle, and I honestly think this is true, this is going to be such a weird one to say, but I feel like I care too much about catching fish. And I hate how that even just came out of my mouth because it feels like I'm doing the thing when you go into a job interview and someone says, hey, what's your biggest weakness? And then the person being interviewed goes like, oh, it's, my biggest weakness is I try too hard. Or I put too much pressure on myself. I care too much. And everybody just rolls their eyes because all you did was just say something that makes it seem like you're a really hard worker and you tried to spin that into a weakness because you didn't want to give them your real weakness. So I understand that saying my weakness or a big struggle of mine is that I care too much about catching fish. But I think if I explain this right, you guys might be able to understand. So what I basically mean is like there will be times where I go out on the water with the specific intent to put time in with a particular piece of gear. It could be a rod, a reel, a bait, whatever. But then I get on the water and all I care about is catching fish and fishing. And my focus on that particular piece of gear or whatever just goes out the window and I get full tunnel vision on catching fish. And on one hand, I think it's probably a personal strength of mine as an angler is that I don't focus on anything but fishing. There are days where I don't touch my phone for 8 hours. I don't take a single picture. I don't video anything like ever. I literally just want to catch fish. And the reason that I have such a passion for Tackle Talk and for this industry is because I just have a red hot fire in me to catch fish, not to go fishing and leisurely stroll around the lake. I hate wasting time. I hate inefficiency. I just want to catch more fish. So it's hard at a certain point to get my brain to say, hey, I know that you should make a big move and go hit that point from the south side with a pointer 100 SP or something, but you really should pick up that spinning rod and put that time in with that winged fluke that you want to review so bad. And what do? I throw that out the window and I book it over to the south side of that point and I launch that Lucky Craft 100 pointer SP on that point because I think that's what I should be doing to catch fish. I have a really hard time making myself abandon the sole goal of catching fish for the sake of playing with gear that's not right for the situation, but I need to put time in with for the show. It's a weird thing to explain, but it's probably my biggest struggle is balancing the need to try a lot of gear and to better form my opinions on certain gear with that innate desire just to go out and catch fish by whatever means necessary. So weird answer, I know, but it's the truth and it's something that I struggle with a lot. Okay, and the other question here we have for the mailbag today is a question I pulled from a gentleman named Jeremiah. And he says, hey, Andrew, this is my first time writing in, but I've been a long-time listener of the show. I've noticed lately that the show is continuing to evolve, and it seems like you've found a groove that works really well. I don't know about everybody else, but I really like this current format because I get a little bit of everything every week instead of the old shows where it was just one single topic, and if it didn't apply to me, then that week was a wash. Now I feel like you have a nice mix of fan engagement and interactiveness with the fishing pole and the mailbag, and a way to still hear from the pros, and we still get our science, technique, or gear segment somewhere in the middle, it seems like. How did you come up with the current rundown, and was it something that you planned out or just changed over time? If this question is too odd for the show, I understand, but I was curious. Thanks, Jeremiah. Well, Jeremiah, first off, I feel like I should probably pay you for that question and your thoughtful analysis of the Tackle Talk podcast. But yeah, I mean, you might have given me too much credit here. I'm glad that you think that way, but this is what I've always wanted to get to, is like a weekly episode that has, I think as you put it in your question, a little bit of everything. I wanted to get to a point where we have something that everybody can enjoy every episode. And that's hard to do in a 30 to 60 minute episode. But for instance, if you love pro fishing, then there might be some news at the top of the show. If we have tournaments to go over really fast, or we have the Tackle Talk pro tip that we're throwing into certain episodes. I heard from a lot of you, years ago that your favorite episodes were the mailbag episodes. So instead of doing a full mailbag once every month or two, now we do the mailbag at the end of every episode, so you get a little bit of it every single week. If you wanted more of like an interactive feel and to be able to participate, and also that kind of completely random topic every week, then we have the fishing pole. And then if you want your regular Tackle Talk content, we sprinkle that throughout the episodes as well. So I've really been enjoying this iteration of Tackle Talk that we've done over the past month or two, and we'll still do guest episodes, but I think a guest episode every month or so kind of feels right, Not too many, but enough that we still get to have some fun conversations here or there. I do really like the recurring segments because I feel like they give the episodes some consistency every single week while still switching up the topics and the focuses every episode. So you still get that kind of never know what you're going to get feel that we've always tried to have here on Tackle Talk. But as far as where I came up with some of those ideas, I guess you can take like our new segment, the Tackle Talk Pro Tip. That was just an idea that I had because I love all of our friends that we've made in the pro fishing world, but I honestly think some of them are starting to get burnt out on podcasts. And I don't blame them one bit. When we first started doing Tackle Talk, there were like 2 or 3 fishing podcasts total. And now I feel like there's probably 3 million fishing podcasts. And I know that they get asked by 1 billion people to come on my podcast. So I thought, I wonder if there's a way where we could still have them be a part of Tackle Talk without having to take up an hour or more of their time. So the pro tip is a way where they can just text me a really juicy fishing tip or submit an audio or video segment if they want. It's up to them. And then we can break it down in detail here on the show. And then something like the fishing poll, I just wanted to do a fan vote type segment for a while, but I didn't want it to just be oh, here are the results and then you move on, because I think that's kind of boring. So I thought, how fun would it be if I get to give my opinion first on the question blind before I actually open up the results? And then that way you can make sure what I'm saying is not swayed by the public opinion or, me wanting to fit in or agree with you all, or the opposite, just trying to disagree for the sake of disagreeing. That it's like my genuine feelings on the topic before we actually see the results from you all, the listeners. And then the mailbag, the mailbag's the mailbag. We've done that for a long time, but like a lot of ideas, obviously it's not something that started here on Tackle Talk. Shows from a bunch of different genres have been doing a listener submission type segment since the beginning of time. But most shows or YouTube lives or whatever, you have that ability to comment and be a part of the conversation right there in the show. We obviously don't have that because we are not live and we're not on YouTube and there's no live chat. So I just wanted there to be a way where you get that feel a little bit, just in a different way of you being able to be a part of the show. So yeah, it comes from all different kinds of places, but after 6+ years, I think we have finally found a formula that works and feels right for the show. So news and housekeeping right up there at the top of the episode. You get your main segment, you get your optional pro tip if we have one, you have the fishing pole and the mailbag to end it. I like the feel and the flow of that for a show of Tackle Talk, and again, hopefully you guys do too. That's the format that I think we're going to stick with here for a little bit. All right, everybody, that is our episode today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, I know this is more of like a show-heavy episode as we start 2026, but I feel like you guys deserve to be in the know and have the updates and the answers to what's going on here on the show. You guys, I've said it before, are just as big a part of this as I am. So this is, it's our show. It's not my show. This is our community. This is our show that we've built over the past 6+ years, and just ready to kick off 2026 on a great foot. So next week, we will be back to a lot of fishing talk, a lot of technique talk. If you have any questions you want to submit for the mailbag, you can go to tackletalkpodcast.com/mailbag. You can also email me, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. You can keep up with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all at Tackle Talk Podcast. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.